Okay, so a quick introduction to our subject, from violence to social justice. What is the subject about? What is the structure, the forms of assessment, and why we even have such a topic? So the first thing is violence is a very broad topic, and it tends to be covered in a lot of different places, but very seldom like in one place with a big umbrella, including a range of different kinds of violence and the different approaches to thinking about them. So we're trying to do that here. And that means we're covering a range of different issues. Now, often when people think about violence, the first thing they think about is kind of being attacked by another person. The idea of being mugged, someone pulling a weapon on you, someone assaulting you, a sexual assault. That's just one type of violence, very important, but there's a much bigger spectrum than that. The other thing people think of is this sort of televisual version of violence, the Criminal Minds, the CSI, the forensics of tracking down serial killers, serial rapists, those kinds of things. And that's another version of violence. That's also something that's interesting, but actually a very, very small part of the problem of violence. In fact, statistically, though, those kind of serially violent pathological offenders are not really a big social problem. That's also why the word from violence to social justice, that word justice is attached there, because it's not just about law enforcement, it's not just about catching violent offenders through forensics, it's also about understanding why societies make some people more likely to be victims than others, and some people more likely to be perpetrators of victims than others. What's going on with that? And one of the problems with a narrowly forensic approach is it only kicks in after someone's been harmed. And one of the things we want to do is to say, is there stuff we can do before people get harmed also, and combine this full range of different understandings of different kinds of violence and different approaches to solving them. Now, from the outset, the subject is divided into two kind of sections. The one deals with large-scale forms of violence, which is often ones we don't think about. So those are the really kind of large-scale catastrophic things that happen: the wars, the genocides, the ethnic cleansings, the mass discrimination and violence against entire categories of people that often happen. So we'll think about some examples of that. The other is, and this is what people often are really thinking about, is the interpersonal kinds of violence, the idea of people getting into fights, people being victims of a violent crime that involves threats of weapon. So we'll be looking at that too, and extending even that to include things like bullying, things like neglect, things like emotional abuse, to the full range of the kind of violent assaults that the criminal justice system often thinks about. And within that, we can then look at a number of questions. For instance, there's a big question about the relation between gender and violence, that we know that men are very often responsible for the kinds of overt physical violence that occur. But what's less known is they're also very often the victims of violence, much more than women are. So that creates an interesting problem. Why is gender related to violence, and how can we understand that? And the other, of course, that then starts mapping out into things like, well, what's the emergence of kind of incel culture about? The emergence of these new influences that are trying to reassert kinds of masculinities, kinds of gender relations that seem to be in some ways linked to violence, just as there's a move to kind of reinstate certain kinds of politics of discrimination against vulnerable people, politics of exclusion. Well, what is the relation between that and acts of violence? So it becomes quite a complex picture that we're going to be looking at. And one of the ways we're going to look at it is not just by reading the sort of traditional academic textbook chapters, journal articles. One of the things is the ideas of violence circulate in popular culture. They're around us all the time. They in our social media, they on our streaming services, fictional, non-fictional, conspiracy theories. We want to look at all of those and make sense through all of that stuff. Of what is going on. How can we actually understand it in a way that is more informed, that is more critically insightful? So we're going to be watching some movies. We're going to be looking at trends happening on social media, and then, of course, reading the academic texts that give us really good concepts, really good theories for tying these different experiences together. And that's going to happen over 12 weeks. There's a different theme every week, and the final week there's a kind of overview and integration theme, but there's also an interesting structure in the subject, because one of the things about studying violence is that it's unpleasant. It's emotionally and distressing sometimes. Some topics are, some topics aren't. And the interesting thing is that different people experience the different topics in different ways. Some people will find it very confronting and perhaps traumatizing to talk about child abuse or sexual violence, whereas another person may not be affected by that and may be very affected by looking at political violence or genocide. And because of that, we try to be really thoughtful about this, and we try to take a trauma-informed approach, which says we recognize that this is not only an intellectual task, it's an emotional task as well. We're trying to deal with something that feels difficult at a personal, subjective, emotional level. And we think about that, and because of that, we try and structure a certain flexibility. So although I said there's 12 weeks, there's in fact 14 themes, and you choose. You can say, well, that topic doesn't interest me, or that topic is in fact too confronting for me, and then you don't do it, and you choose something that's more appropriate for you. Similarly with the assessments, and there are 4 different assessments. The one is kind of very fixed, which is quizzes every week. These are just short little fact-based quizzes, just to see, what is your knowledge, what's your level of understanding. But then there are 3 other assessments. The one is a group project where you actually work with a team and you produce a presentation on a film or documentary. And so you get a chance to do some teamwork. There is a possibility not to do that also, if that's not suitable for you. But then the 2 biggest assessments are 2 essays. And what's interesting about these essays is you've got a lot of flexibility. You can more or less write on whatever topic you want to that relates to the theories and concepts we're exploring. So there's a lot of flexibility to develop your own interests, to develop the areas that you want expertise in, that you maybe want to go into professionally, or things that are just really things you want to understand, that you're interested and concerned about things going on, and you'd like to make deeper sense of them. There's a lot of flexibility with those kind of assignments, and there's a lot of flexibility with the overall structure of the course. So that's pretty much it. The course doesn't require you to have any particular background. Like, it doesn't particularly require you to have a background in criminology or legal studies or anything like that. In fact, we have great diversity of interest. Some people do have that background. Other people come out of global studies. Other people come out of psychology. Other people just are sort of broad social scientists or even health scientists who want to understand these issues. And the course is designed to be accessible and accommodating to all those different interest levels, all those different backgrounds. So it really is quite open-ended and creates a lot of opportunity for you to go in the directions that interest you, because it is such a broad topic, and it is also such a kind of emotionally complex topic that you can work out how to allocate your interests and where you want to end up, what you want to learn. So further than that, the subject learning guide gives you a detailed breakdown of the technical information, what each week's themes and readings are, what the different assessments are, when they're going to happen, and you're also welcome to drop me an email with any further questions that you have.